The first proof of my death was taped to the iron gate of my grandmother's house. It was a photograph of me. Not a recent one. My sister had chosen a picture from my 50th birthday, taken before the gray reached my temples and before I learned how quickly a familiar face could become dangerous. Beneath it, printed in elegant black letters, were the words, "In loving memory of Nora Whitmore. 1966 to 2026. For several seconds, I stood on the sidewalk with my travel bag hanging from one shoulder, wondering whether 6 months in the mountains had damaged my ability to read. Then I noticed the flowers. White roses lined the driveway. A black ribbon had been tied around the brass intercom. And through the open curtains of the drawing room, I could see my younger sister drinking champagne beneath a portrait that now belonged to me. Or should have. I had spent 6 months helping rebuild a medical clinic in a village where electricity arrived for 3 hours each evening and the nearest mobile signal was a 2-hour walk uphill. While I was gone, my sister had reported me missing. Then dead. She had produced a death certificate, closed my bank accounts, taken control of my grandmother's estate, and started telling people that grief had made her stronger. According to the city, the courts, and every official record that mattered, I no longer existed. My sister had not simply stolen my inheritance. She had stolen the right to prove that I was alive. And 4 days after I returned, she was holding a memorial service in my honor. She believed I would arrive angry. She believed I would call the police, pound on the gate, and give her enough warning to destroy whatever evidence remained. She had always mistaken my silence for weakness. That was the first mistake she made. The second was planning my funeral before making sure I was buried. The taxi driver asked twice whether he had the correct address. Yes, I told him. Number 42. He leaned forward and looked through the windshield at the stone pillars framing the property. Big place. It belonged to my grandmother. The sentence came out naturally. Belonged. Past tense. I had not yet understood how accurate that word had become. The Whitmore estate sat behind a row of old elm trees on the northern edge of the city. My grandmother, Eleanor, had lived there for 53 years. She had planted the lavender along the front path herself and refused to replace the uneven stone steps because my grandfather had laid them by hand. When she died 8 months earlier, she left the property to my sister and me. Not equally. That detail had mattered more to Lydia than I realized. I paid the driver, lifted my suitcase from the trunk, and stood beside the curb as the taxi disappeared. The city felt louder than I remembered. Engines. Distant construction. A dog barking behind a neighboring fence. After half a year in San Aurelio, where mornings began with chickens scratching beneath my window and children carrying water down red earth paths, even ordinary traffic sounded aggressive. I walked toward the pedestrian gate and entered the security code. The keypad flashed red. I tried again. Red. I wiped the dust from my thumb and entered my grandmother's birthday. The lock remained closed. That was when I saw the ribbon around the intercom. Black satin. Neatly tied. Below it, someone had attached the memorial poster beneath a thin sheet of plastic. My own face smiled back at me. I read the dates once. Then again. The year of birth was correct. The date of death was 6 weeks earlier. I stared at the final number until it blurred. There are moments when the mind protects itself by concentrating on something small. I did not scream. I did not cry. I noticed that the poster had been printed on expensive paper. I noticed that my sister had used my full legal name rather than the shortened version everyone called me. I noticed that the photograph had been cropped so tightly that Lydia's shoulder, visible in the original, had disappeared. Someone had taken time with it. Someone had approved the layout. Someone had looked at a picture of a living woman and chosen the date she supposedly stopped breathing. "Mrs. Whitmore?" The voice came from behind me. I turned. Our former neighbor, Thomas Bell, stood on the pavement holding a paper bag of groceries. He was 72, tall and narrow, with the permanently concerned expression of a man who had spent 40 years teaching mathematics to teenagers. The bag slipped from his hands. 2 oranges rolled into the street. "Nora?" His face emptied of color. I took 1 step toward him. "Thomas, it's all right." He backed away. Not dramatically. Just 1 uncertain step, his heel catching against the curb. "I was told." "I know what you were told. You're alive." "Yes." He looked toward the house, then back at me. For the first time, fear entered his expression. Not fear of me. Fear for me. "Does Lydia know you're here?" "No." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I bent and picked up one of the oranges. My hand was steadier than his when I returned it. "What happened?" I asked. Thomas glanced at the camera mounted above the gate. "Not here." That frightened me more than the poster. We went to a cafe 3 streets away. It was one of those quiet places designed to resemble an old library, with dark shelves, brass lamps, and tables placed far enough apart to discourage overhearing. Thomas chose a seat in the back. He kept looking at me as though I might vanish if he blinked. The waitress brought coffee. He did not touch his. "You disappeared in January," he said. "I left in January. Lydia knew where I was going. She said you were expected back in March. My placement was extended. I sent a letter. To Lydia? And to Mr. Caro, the estate solicitor." Thomas rubbed a hand over his mouth. "In April, Lydia started asking whether anyone had heard from you. She came door to door. She looked," he paused. "Distressed." Lydia had always been skilled at looking distressed. As children, she could cry without making her nose red. Even our grandmother used to say Lydia's emotions arrived dressed for company. "What did she tell people?" "That you had left the village after an argument with the project coordinator. That you had taken a bus alone through the mountain pass. None of that happened. A few weeks later, she said there had been an accident." The cafe seemed to narrow around me. "What kind of accident?" "A vehicle went off a mountain road. Several passengers were killed." She said identification took time because, his eyes dropped to the table. "Because of the condition of the bodies." I pressed my thumb against the rim of the coffee cup. The ceramic was warm. I focused on that. Warm meant present. Present meant alive. "Did anyone see a body?" "I don't believe so." "Was there a funeral?" She said you had been buried near the village according to public health regulations. She showed people documents. What documents? A translated death certificate. A letter from a regional authority. Something from the consulate. Each answer made the situation less believable and more dangerous. A lie told casually creates questions. A lie supported by paperwork creates obedience. How did she get those documents? I don't know. Thomas finally lifted his coffee, but his hand trembled against the saucer. The memorial service was delayed because Lydia wanted it to be appropriate. Appropriate? She called it a celebration of your life. I looked toward the window. Across the street, people moved between shops carrying ordinary bags, making ordinary plans. A woman adjusted a scarf around her child's neck. A delivery driver argued with someone on the telephone. No one knew a dead woman was sitting behind the glass. When is it? This Saturday. 4 days away. Thomas lowered his voice. She has invited nearly 200 people. That sounded like Lydia. Even my death had become a social opportunity. Where? At the estate. Of course it was. I asked Thomas not to call anyone. He disagreed immediately. You need the police. I need information. You have a memorial poster with your name on it. What more information do you need? I need to know whether Lydia made a false report, forged one document, or constructed an entire legal identity around my death. His expression tightened. You're speaking as if this is a business problem. No. I'm speaking as if it is already larger than a family problem. I had learned something during 32 years as a financial compliance officer. Panic makes people reach for the first explanation that offers relief. Evidence rarely arrives in that order. If I walk into a police station now, I said, what happens? They see that you're alive. They see a woman claiming to be Nora Whitmore. My passport may support that. Unless it has been reported lost, cancelled, or fraudulent. Thomas said nothing. My sister has had 6 months to prepare. I have had 40 minutes. The number silenced him. I placed both hands flat on the table. I'm not protecting her. I'm protecting the truth from being reduced to my word against hers. He studied me for a long time. You always were the patient one. That was not always a compliment. No, he said quietly. But it may save you now. My first stop was not the police station. It was my bank. The branch occupied the ground floor of a glass building downtown. I had known the manager, Mr. Feldman, for 11 years. We had discussed interest rates, fraud prevention procedures, and once, during a particularly long appointment, his daughter's decision to leave medical school. The receptionist entered my name into her computer. Her expression changed. Not visibly enough for most people to notice. But I had spent a career watching faces across conference tables. Her eyes paused. Her shoulders drew back. Then she looked at me again. Do you have an appointment? No. One moment, please. She stood and walked quickly toward a door marked Private Client Services. She did not invite me to sit. 3 minutes later, a security officer appeared near the entrance. He did not approach me. He simply positioned himself where I could see him. Mr. Feldman came through the private door carrying no folder. Nora? Hello, Martin. His lips parted. The receptionist pretended not to listen. Mr. Feldman stepped closer. I think we should speak privately. That would be sensible. Inside his office, he closed the blinds. He did not sit behind his desk. Instead, he remained standing beside it, as though uncertain which version of our relationship applied. I need to ask for identification. I handed him my passport. He examined the cover, then the photograph, then me. He scanned it. The computer made a quiet warning sound. Martin's jaw tightened. What does it say? That this passport was reported compromised. By whom? I can't disclose. Martin. He looked at me. I am sitting in your office. You attended my grandmother's funeral. You know who I am. I know who you appear to be. The sentence hurt more than it should have. Not because he doubted me. Because someone had created a world in which doubting me was reasonable. What happened to my accounts? I'm not authorized to discuss accounts belonging to a deceased client. The room went very still. Say that again. He looked down. Our records show that Nora Evelyn Whitmore died on June 3rd. June 3rd. A Tuesday. I remembered that day. I had spent the morning repairing water damage in the clinic storage room. At noon, a little girl named Anna brought me a bowl of mango slices. That evening, I wrote 3 pages in my journal because rain had kept everyone indoors. Somewhere, while I had been drying medicine boxes in the mountains, my sister had chosen that date to kill me. Who notified the bank? A legal representative submitted certified documents. Lydia? Martin hesitated. That was enough. How much money was in the accounts when they were closed? I cannot. Was it transferred into the estate? His silence became an answer. I leaned back. My grandmother had left me more than the house. There were investment accounts, municipal bonds, and a controlling interest in a small group of commercial properties she had acquired over 4 decades. My share was worth several $1,000,000. But grandmother had written one restriction into the will. Neither sister could sell or borrow against the primary estate for 5 years unless both agreed. If one beneficiary died, her interest passed to the surviving sister. Lydia had hated that clause. She had called it an insult. Grandmother had called it protection. Now I understood whom she had been protecting me from. Has the Whitmore inheritance been distributed? Martin moved behind his desk. Nora, you need an attorney. That means yes. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. He placed my passport on the desk but kept one hand resting over it. Until this is resolved, I'm required to retain the document. I almost laughed. My sister reports me dead, drains my accounts, compromises my passport, and your procedure is to confiscate the one document I have left? I'm following federal guidance. And I'm not blaming you. That surprised him. Anger would have made him defensive. Calm made him listen. But I need something from you, I continued. Not confidential records. A name. I can't provide. The legal representative who submitted the death documents. I need to know whether it was Mr. Caro. His eyes shifted. Barely. But enough. It was not Mr. Caro. Thank you, I said. I didn't tell you anything. No. You were very careful. I stood. He looked at me with a mixture of worry and professional discomfort. What are you going to do? I'm going to find out why a stranger handled my death. Outside, the afternoon sunlight felt too bright. I had no bank access. No valid passport. No access to the estate. And according to the government, I had been dead for 45 days. I sat on a bench across from the bank and removed the small canvas notebook I had carried through San Aurelio. On a clean page, I wrote. What Lydia gained. My estate share. My investment accounts, control of the house, freedom from the 5-year restriction. Then, what Lydia risked. Forgery, fraud, identity theft, perjury, international document falsification. The risk was disproportionate. Lydia was selfish. She was envious. She had spent most of her adult life treating money as proof that someone loved her. But she was not reckless enough to commit a crime of this scale merely to redecorate a house. There had to be pressure. A debt. A partner. Or a deadline. I turned the page. Who helped her? The question sat there like an open door. My next call was to Edward Caro, my grandmother's solicitor. His assistant answered. This is Nora Whitmore. There was a pause. Then a small intake of breath. I'm sorry, who? Nora Whitmore. I believe you may have the wrong office. I do not. Another pause. Please hold. The line went silent. 30 seconds later, Edward answered. He was 68 and had worked with my grandmother for almost half his life. His voice had always carried the slow confidence of someone who billed by the hour and rarely heard the word no. That afternoon, it sounded thin. Nora? Yes. Where are you? In the city. Are you safe? The question was not what I expected. Yes. Have you spoken to Lydia? No. Do not. I stood from the bench. What do you know? Not over the telephone. Edward, my bank believes I'm dead. I know. My sister has taken control of the estate. I know. And you allowed it? His breath caught. I challenged the documents. But the inheritance was transferred. Not through my office. There it was. The stranger. Who represented Lydia? A firm called Vale and Mercer. I knew the name. Not well, but enough. They specialized in corporate restructuring, private acquisitions, and clients who preferred their names to remain out of newspapers. They don't handle family probate, I said. Normally, no. Then why were they involved? Edward was quiet. I sent you 2 registered letters in March, I said. Did you receive them? No. I sent one directly to your office. It never arrived. That chilled me. A village letter going missing was ordinary. A registered letter disappearing inside a city law office was not. Meet me, I said. My office may not be private. Then choose somewhere that is. He gave me the address of a small hotel near the old courthouse. 40 minutes. Edward. Yes? Does Lydia know you questioned the death certificate? Another silence. Yes. Then do not leave your office alone. The hotel lobby smelled of polished wood and lilies. Edward arrived wearing the same navy suit he had worn to my grandmother's funeral. He looked older than he had 8 months earlier. The skin beneath his eyes was bruised with exhaustion, and one side of his collar had folded inward. He did not shake my hand. He embraced me. The gesture lasted only a second, but it broke something inside me. Until then, everyone had looked at me as a problem to verify. Edward was the first person who reacted as though I had returned. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For not stopping it. We sat in the far corner. He removed a slim file from his briefcase. I cannot give this to you. Technically, I shouldn't even show it to you. Because I'm dead. Because there is an active dispute regarding your legal identity. He opened the file. The death certificate was on top. My name. My date of birth. My passport number. My mother's maiden name. All correct. The certificate claimed I had died following internal injuries sustained in a passenger vehicle accident outside Santa Lorenza. I had never been to Santa Lorenza. The document carried a government seal, a physician's signature, and an authentication stamp from a regional court. It looked real. That was the problem. Did you verify it? I contacted the issuing office. They confirmed the certificate number. Then someone inside the system created it. Possibly. Or an existing record was altered. He turned the page. A translated police report described a damaged bus, unidentified passengers, and a personal bag recovered near the scene. Inside the bag, according to the inventory, were copies of my identification, a bracelet engraved with my initials, and a photograph of Lydia and me. The bracelet had belonged to our mother. I had left it in a jewelry box at the estate. My sister had built a body out of objects. She did not need my remains. She only needed enough pieces of my life to make death believable. Edward slid another document toward me. It was a sworn declaration signed by Lydia. In it, she described identifying the bracelet and personal belongings. She wrote that I had no spouse, no children, and no other immediate relatives able to confirm my identity. Then came the line that changed everything. My sister had recently expressed a desire to disappear and begin a new life away from her financial and family responsibilities. I read it twice. She told them I wanted to vanish. She created an explanation for why you might later be seen alive, Edward said. The intelligence of it disturbed me. If I returned, Lydia could claim I had staged my death. I would not merely be challenging a forged certificate. I would be accused of participating in the fraud. She planned for me to come back, I whispered. Edward nodded. Yes. The noise of the hotel lobby seemed to recede. My sister had not overlooked the possibility of my survival. She had prepared to weaponize it. What happened to the estate? I asked. Vale and Mercer petitioned for an accelerated transfer. They argued that delays were causing financial harm to the surviving beneficiary. What harm? Lydia claimed the property required urgent structural repairs and that outstanding business obligations depended on the release of funds. Business obligations? Edward opened another section. 6 weeks before my supposed death, Lydia had incorporated a company called Everly House International. The name sounded elegant and meaningless. What does it do? Luxury wellness residences. Private clubs. Senior living developments marketed as heritage estates. I looked at him. She has never managed a company. She has investors. With whose money? That is what concerns me. He showed me a financing summary. The estate had not merely been transferred. Parts of it had been pledged as security. Commercial properties were being refinanced. My grandmother's investment portfolio had been liquidated in stages. Lydia was not spending the inheritance. She was feeding it into something. How much remains? I don't know. Estimate. Edward's face answered before he did. Less than half may still be liquid. I stared at the financial pages. My grandmother had spent 40 years building that estate. Lydia had consumed half of it in 45 days. Why didn't you contact me? We tried. How? Email. Telephone. The charity office in the capital. The capital office had no direct contact with our village during the rainy season. I understand that now. And my email? Your account responded. I looked up. What did it say? That you wanted no contact with the family. That you had transferred your affairs to Lydia. My email was hacked. Most likely. Edward closed the file. There is something else. Of course there was. There is always something else when a lie has had time to mature. The court issued an interim finding regarding your identity. What finding? If someone claiming to be you returned, that person would need to submit to formal verification before interfering with the estate. That sounds reasonable. It would include a fraud inquiry. I understood. The moment I stepped forward, I would become both victim and suspect. Lydia would have access to the estate's lawyers. I had no money, no valid passport, and no legal existence. She had not simply locked me outside my home. She had arranged the law so that I would have to ask permission to be alive. Edward wanted me to go directly to a federal investigator. He was probably right. But I asked him one final question. Has Lydia seen the original will? Yes. Did grandmother leave any discretionary provisions? His expression changed. Only slightly. But I had known Edward since I was 19. What aren't you telling me? I'm bound by privilege. To whom? He looked toward the lobby entrance. Then he leaned closer. Your grandmother anticipated conflict between you. That is not an answer. She created safeguards outside the primary probate file. What safeguards? I cannot discuss them until your identity is legally restored. The answer frustrated me. But it also gave me the first thing I had felt since seeing the poster. Not hope. Hope was too soft. This was leverage. Grandmother had known Lydia. Perhaps not the crime she would commit, but the hunger underneath it. Does Lydia know about these safeguards? I don't believe so. Keep it that way. Edward's eyes narrowed. What are you planning? Nothing illegal. That is not reassuring. It should be. I stood and pushed the file back toward him. Do not tell Lydia you saw me. Nora. If she learns I'm here, she will move whatever remains. She may already be doing that. Then I need to know where it is going before I announce that I survived. Edward looked deeply uncomfortable. You are not an investigator. No. What exactly are you? I lifted my travel bag. For the moment? I looked at the people crossing the lobby without seeing me. A woman attending her own memorial. I spent that night in Thomas Bell's guest room. The room had belonged to his daughter before she moved overseas. Family photographs still covered one wall. A pale square marked the place where a school certificate had once hung. Thomas left clean towels on the bed and a glass of water on the nightstand. He did not ask whether I was all right. Older people understand that some questions are invitations to lie. At midnight, I opened my old email account from his computer. The password no longer worked. My social media profiles had been converted into memorial pages. Hundreds of messages filled the public feed. Former colleagues. Distant cousins. Women I had worked beside 20 years earlier. They wrote about my kindness, my reserve, my loyalty. A few apologized for losing touch. Death had made them honest. I read until the words began to repeat. Then I found Lydia's post. It had received more than 3,000 reactions. She had written, my sister Nora spent her life caring for others. Her final journey was another act of service. I will carry her dreams forward, even when grief makes every step feel impossible. Below the statement was a photograph of Lydia standing beside my grandmother's fireplace. She wore black. Her hand rested against her chest. On her finger was grandmother's emerald ring. The ring had been left to me. I enlarged the photograph. Behind Lydia, on the library table, lay a stack of folders bearing the Everly House logo. Beside them stood a man I recognized. Daniel Vale. Senior partner at Vale and Mercer. So the law firm was not merely handling Lydia's inheritance claim. Its founding partner was inside the estate. I searched his name alongside Everly House. A promotional article appeared. The company was preparing to announce its first major development at an invitation-only event. The location was undisclosed. The date was Saturday. The same day as my memorial. Lydia was not gathering 200 people to mourn me. She was using my funeral to launch her company. My photograph would be at the entrance. My story would soften the room. And while people raised glasses to the dead humanitarian sister, Lydia would present herself as the grieving woman transforming tragedy into a business legacy. My death was not simply paperwork. It was marketing. At 1 a.m, I returned to the memorial page. Lydia had uploaded a video. I pressed play. She sat in grandmother's drawing room, surrounded by white flowers. Her voice was soft. Measured. I keep expecting Nora to walk through the door, she said. I almost closed the screen. Then Lydia looked directly into the camera. There are moments when I still feel she is watching me. Her smile trembled perfectly. But I know she would want me to keep moving forward. I watched the clip again without sound. The lowered eyes. The careful breath. The pause before my name. Lydia had rehearsed grief the way other people rehearsed speeches. And for the first time since returning, I allowed myself to feel anger. Not loud anger. Not the kind that throws glasses or sends messages at midnight. Mine arrived quietly. It settled behind my ribs and made everything clearer. I thought of the death certificate. The compromised passport. The bracelet taken from my room. The statement claiming I wanted to disappear. My sister had not acted in panic. She had studied me. She had selected the parts of my personality that could be twisted into evidence. My privacy became isolation. My independence became instability. My charity work became a desire to escape. She had taken every quiet thing about me and made it testify against me. The next morning, Thomas drove me past the estate. I wore one of his daughter's coats and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded my face. We did not stop. Through the iron fence, I saw delivery vans parked along the circular drive. Workers carried lighting equipment toward the ballroom. A florist arranged white branches around a large framed photograph of me. Near the front steps, a black luxury car pulled to a stop. Lydia emerged. She wore cream trousers, dark glasses, and the emerald ring. A younger assistant hurried behind her carrying folders. Lydia pointed toward the entrance, corrected the position of an arrangement, and checked her reflection in the glass door. There was no grief in her movements. Only ownership. Then Daniel Vale stepped out of the car. He placed one hand against Lydia's back. The gesture was brief. Familiar. Not professional. Lydia turned toward him and said something that made them both laugh. My sister was laughing beneath my memorial photograph. Thomas gripped the steering wheel. Do you want me to stop? No. She's right there. I see her. You could confront her now. I watched Lydia walk into the house where we had grown up. My house. My name. My inheritance. My funeral. No, I said. Why not? Because Lydia is expecting a dead woman to behave emotionally. I lowered the brim of the hat as Daniel looked toward the road. And I need to discover what she does when the dead woman stays quiet. That afternoon, an envelope arrived at Thomas's house. There was no stamp. Someone had pushed it beneath the front door. My name was written across it. Not Nora Whitmore. Just Nora. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You should have stayed gone. Thomas read it over my shoulder. She knows. Someone knows. That distinction doesn't make me feel better. It did not make me feel better either. But beneath the warning, pressed faintly into the paper, was the impression of another message written on the sheet above it. I tilted the page toward the light. 3 words were visible. Saturday. Final transfer. The memorial was not only a company launch. Something was being completed that night. A sale. A payment. Perhaps the last movement of the inheritance. I folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. For 45 days, my sister had controlled the story because everyone believed I was dead. Now someone had seen me. The advantage of surprise was disappearing. I had 4 days to decide whether to walk into a police station and surrender control of the evidence, or remain a ghost long enough to learn what Lydia was still trying to bury. Before I tell you which choice I made, ask yourself honestly. Would you reveal yourself immediately? Or let the person who stole your life believe they were still being watched by the dead? Because the next morning, I sent my sister the first message only I could have written. And by sunset, Lydia had started searching the house for a ghost. The first message I sent my sister contained only 7 words. You left Mother's bracelet in the wrong grave. No greeting. No signature. No threat. Just a fact Lydia believed only she knew. I typed it from a prepaid telephone Thomas bought at a convenience store across town. I sent it at 8:12 on Wednesday morning, when Lydia was usually drinking coffee in grandmother's sunroom. Then I turned the phone off. Thomas watched me place it inside a metal biscuit tin. That's it? That's enough. You don't want to see whether she responds? She won't respond. How do you know? Because admitting she understands the message would admit she knows about the bracelet. He considered that. What will she do instead? She'll check the grave. Thomas frowned. There is no grave. Exactly. By 10 that morning, Lydia's black sedan left the estate. I knew because Thomas had parked his car beside a pharmacy with a clear view of the main road. We sat beneath the shade of a plane tree pretending to read newspapers. Lydia was not driving. Daniel Vale sat beside her in the rear seat. A third man rode in front. They headed east, toward the municipal offices and the private airport beyond them. Thomas lowered his paper. Should we follow? No. You just said she would check. I said she would react. Following her gives us one answer and creates 10 risks. I photographed the car's license plate as it passed. Then I wrote the time in my notebook. My entire career had taught me that fraud rarely collapses because of one dramatic confession. It collapses under dates, signatures, phone records, payments made 2 hours before someone claimed ignorance. People lie with confidence because they assume no one is writing down the ordinary details. I had started writing everything down. At 11:15, Edward called Thomas's landline. He spoke carefully. Vale and Mercer requested emergency access to archived probate documents. Which documents? The original death verification packet. Why? They said the court required a certified duplicate. Did the court request it? No. Lydia had checked the grave. Not physically. Legally. She was reviewing the documents, searching for whatever flaw my message suggested. Do they know you questioned the certificate? I asked. They know I declined to certify it personally. Then they'll assume the message came from you. I'm not sure that helps me. It gives me time. Edward exhaled. Nora, this is not a game. I know. I received an invitation to Saturday's memorial. Are you attending? I had planned not to. Go. There was silence. You want me inside? I need someone Lydia considers predictable. I object to being described that way. You were the same tie to every probate hearing. It's a good tie. Then wear it Saturday. Despite everything, I heard the smallest trace of amusement in his breathing. It vanished quickly. What should I look for? Who is treated as family but isn't? Who can enter the study without knocking? Who leaves before the public announcement? You think they're completing a financial transaction at the memorial. The note said final transfer. The note could be a trap. Yes. And you still intend to go? Yes. Edward lowered his voice. Then understand something. Vale and Mercer have already filed a notice accusing an unknown party of attempting to interfere with the estate through impersonation. My hand tightened around the receiver. They're preparing for me. They are preparing to call you a fraud before you speak. That was Lydia's favorite kind of cruelty. Not the kind that silenced you. The kind that made other people distrust your voice. Send me the filing. I can't send it electronically. They may be monitoring communications. Give it to Thomas. Nora. Please. The word stopped him. I'll arrange it. After he hung up, I remained beside the telephone. Thomas waited. What did he say? My sister has officially warned the court that someone may pretend to be me. Thomas stared at me. But you are you. That is becoming the least useful fact in the room. The second message was not sent by phone. It was placed inside the estate. That required help. At 2 p.m, I called the only person who might still have unquestioned access to the house. Her name was Maribel Santos. She had worked for my grandmother for 26 years, first as a housekeeper and later as the person who quietly managed everything Lydia assumed managed itself. Maribel knew which silver drawer jammed during humid weather. She knew grandmother could not sleep unless the hallway clock was wound every Thursday. She knew which wine Lydia drank when she wanted to appear sophisticated and which one she drank alone. I called from a public telephone outside a railway station. She answered on the 4th ring. Santos residence. Maribel. Her breathing stopped. I heard a television playing somewhere behind her. Then a door closed. Miss Nora? Yes. A quiet sound came through the line. Not quite a sob. Not quite relief. Where are you? Safe. You cannot call here. Why? They asked about me. Who? Mr. Vale's people. They asked whether you contacted me before the accident. What did you tell them? That I had not heard from you. It was true. Truth was useful when it happened to protect you. Do you still work at the estate? No. That surprised me. Lydia dismissed you? 3 weeks ago. Why? She said Everly House required a professional hospitality team. I closed my eyes. Grandmother had trusted Maribel with the alarm codes, the family medication, and every private conversation held after midnight. Lydia had replaced her with employees loyal to the company. Did she accuse you of anything? Maribel hesitated. She said one of your scarves was missing. Which scarf? The blue silk one your grandmother gave you. I remembered it. I had left it folded in the cedar wardrobe. Was it missing? No. But she said it was. Yes. Lydia had been looking for something. Or creating a reason to search my room. Maribel, do you still have a key? Not to the main house. To anything? Another pause. The old greenhouse. Grandmother's greenhouse stood behind the east garden. It connected to the kitchen grounds through a narrow service path concealed by hedges. Is the alarm linked to the house? It has not worked for years. Meet me there tonight. No. The refusal came instantly. They are watching the staff. They dismissed you. That does not mean they stopped watching. She was right. I lowered my voice. I need to know what Lydia removed from my room. I cannot help you enter that house. I'm not asking you to. What are you asking? Bring me the greenhouse key. Nothing else. Maribel said nothing for several seconds. Then she whispered, your grandmother said this would happen. The station noise disappeared around me. What did she say? Not this exactly. But before she died, she told me that if the house ever became too quiet, I should check the winter roses. What does that mean? I don't know. Did she explain? No. She made me promise I would remember. The winter roses. Grandmother had used strange phrases when she did not want Lydia listening. She called bank statements recipes. Legal appointments were dress fittings. When I was 12, she hid my mother's birthday gift beneath a rose bush and told me that certain things survived best under thorns. Tonight, I said. 9:30. Maribel's voice shook. I do not want to see another funeral in that family. Neither do I. Rain began shortly after sunset. Not heavy rain. A thin, persistent drizzle that silvered the roads and softened the edges of street lamps. Thomas drove me to the lane behind the estate. He turned off the headlights before stopping. You have 20 minutes, he said. I may need 30. You have 20. You were less controlling when I was legally alive. You were less inclined to enter dark properties through broken greenhouses. I pulled the hood of my coat over my hair. I am not entering the house. That sentence contains a very specific omission. I opened the door. Keep the engine running. I dislike this version of retirement. So do I. The lane behind the estate bordered an abandoned orchard. Wet branches scraped my sleeves as I followed the old stone wall. The greenhouse appeared through the rain, its glass panes clouded and several panels cracked. Maribel stood beneath the roof overhang holding an umbrella. When she saw me, she crossed herself. Then she touched my face with both hands. You are cold. I'm all right. You are too thin. 6 months of rice and mountain roads. She pulled me into an embrace. For a moment, I smelled lavender soap and starch. The scent of my childhood. The scent of clean sheets and Sunday mornings and grandmother calling from another room. It took more strength than I expected to step away. Maribel handed me a brass key. I should come with you. No. You do not know who is inside. That is why you are staying outside. She looked offended. I have survived this family longer than you have. That is exactly why I need you available tomorrow. I unlocked the greenhouse. The hinges complained softly. Inside, rain ticked against the glass roof. Empty ceramic pots lined the shelves. Dead vines hung from strings near the ceiling. Grandmother's work table remained against the far wall. A pair of rusted pruning shears rested where she had left them. For the first time since returning, I was standing on property that belonged to me. The realization did not feel triumphant. It felt invasive. As though I were trespassing inside my own memory. The winter roses were kept here, Maribel whispered. She pointed toward a row of large planters beneath the north windows. Most were empty. One contained a dry rosebush with pale wooden stems. I crouched and pressed my fingers into the soil. The surface was hard. Undisturbed. No one has touched this in months. Perhaps your grandmother meant the roses in the east garden. Those bloom in summer. Maybe she was confused. No. Grandmother had been weak at the end. But not confused. I stood and examined the room. Winter roses. The phrase might not refer to flowers at all. My eyes settled on the old botanical prints hanging above the work table. 4 framed illustrations. Spring camellia. Summer iris. Autumn chrysanthemum. Winter rose. I lifted the final frame. A small envelope had been taped to the back. Maribel covered her mouth. The envelope carried no name. Inside was a key no longer than my thumb and a handwritten note. A house remembers who cared for it. The north wall does too. I read it twice. What north wall? Maribel asked. I looked toward the estate. Grandmother's library occupied the north side of the house. The room where Lydia had recorded her memorial video. The room where Daniel Vale's folders had appeared in the background. The study used for private conversations. Grandmother had left something there. And Lydia may already have been searching for it. A light came on inside the kitchen wing. Maribel extinguished her flashlight. We remained still. Through the wet greenhouse glass, I saw a man crossing the service courtyard. Security. He carried an umbrella in one hand and a radio in the other. He walked slowly, checking doors. The estate had never employed nighttime guards before. Not even after grandmother's jewelry was stolen 20 years earlier. Lydia was not protecting the house. She was protecting what was happening inside it. The guard stopped outside the greenhouse. His radio crackled. I lowered myself behind the work table. Maribel crouched beside me. The door handle moved. Once. Then again. The old lock held. Greenhouse secure, he said into the radio. A voice answered. Check the east gate. Mrs. Vale thinks someone was near the road. Mrs. Vale. I looked at Maribel. Her eyes widened. Lydia and Daniel were married? Or someone inside the security team believed they were. The guard walked away. We waited until the courtyard light went dark. Then I placed grandmother's key inside my coat. We leave now, I whispered. Maribel touched my arm. You came for the key. Yes. You said you needed to place something inside. I removed a small wooden object from my pocket. A carved bird. One wing chipped. Lydia had made it during a school woodworking class when she was 11. She gave it to me after our mother died because I could not sleep alone. Years later, during an argument, she claimed she had forgotten it existed. I had found it in a storage box at Thomas's house. Grandmother had given him several family items during renovations. What will you do with it? Maribel asked. Remind her what she used to be. That may be more frightening than reminding her of what she did. I looked toward the dark windows. That is the point. I did not enter the main house that night. Maribel did. The following afternoon, Lydia called her and asked her to collect the final payment owed from her dismissal. It was either coincidence or surveillance. Maribel went because refusing would attract suspicion. She carried the wooden bird inside her handbag. I instructed her not to enter any restricted room, not to search for documents, and not to risk being seen. All she had to do was leave the bird in the pantry behind a jar of cinnamon tea. A place Lydia had hidden as a child whenever she was afraid. Maribel called me at 6:12. It is done. Did anyone see you? No. How did Lydia seem? Angry. At you? At everyone. She dismissed the florist because the white flowers looked yellow under the ballroom lighting. Was Daniel there? Yes. Did anyone call him Mr. Vale? No. What did they call him? Maribel lowered her voice. Daniel. Did Lydia wear a wedding ring? No. Did he? No. Mrs. Vale may have been a code. Or Lydia had secretly married him. Both possibilities mattered. Anything else? I asked. Yes. Maribel paused. There are photographs of you in every room. For the memorial. No. Not only memorial photographs. What do you mean? Your passport photograph is on the staff security board. They were told to report anyone resembling you. Lydia was hunting me in my own house. Did you see the north wall? No. The library was locked. Was it normally locked when grandmother lived? Never. We ended the call. I sat at Thomas's kitchen table and stared at grandmother's small key. The north wall was locked. The memorial was 3 days away. And the people inside expected me to come. Lydia found the wooden bird at 7:40 that evening. I knew because she called me. The prepaid phone was still switched off inside the biscuit tin. But at 7:42, Thomas's landline rang. He answered. No one spoke. Then Lydia's voice said, "Put her on." Thomas looked at me. I shook my head. "I'm sorry," he said. "My sister." "Your sister is dead." A long silence followed. Then Lydia laughed. It was not convincing. "Of course she is." The line disconnected. Thomas slowly replaced the receiver. "She knows you're here. She suspects. She called my house. She knows we were close. Then why hide?" Because suspicion forces mistakes. Certainty creates strategy. Thomas stared at me. "You are beginning to sound like your grandmother." That is either reassuring or deeply unfortunate. The phone rang again. This time, a man spoke. "Mr. Bell, this is Adrian Cole from Vale and Mercer. We understand you may have been contacted by someone making fraudulent claims regarding the Whitmore estate." Thomas's posture changed. "What kind of claims?" "A woman may attempt to identify herself as the late Nora Whitmore." "How would a dead woman do that?" "We believe an individual may be exploiting the family's grief." The wording was polished. Prepared. "I see," Thomas said. "If anyone contacts you, do not engage. Notify us immediately. The person may be emotionally unstable." Thomas looked at me while the man spoke. My sister had turned my survival into a mental health warning. "Thank you," Thomas said. "I'll be careful." He hung up. Then he looked ashamed. "Why do I feel as though I betrayed you?" "Because you were polite." I should have told him what I thought. "No. You sounded believable." "I don't enjoy being useful in this matter." "Neither do I." The following morning, Edward delivered the court filing through a young clerk who believed he was bringing Thomas' retirement documents. I read every page. Vale and Mercer alleged that an unidentified woman had contacted members of the community while pretending to be me. They included statements describing me as confused, aggressive, and financially motivated. One statement came from the bank receptionist. She wrote that I appeared disoriented and unwilling to accept documentary proof of Ms. Whitmore's death. Another came from a security contractor who claimed he had seen a woman matching my description near the estate at night. He had not seen me. Not clearly. But truth did not need to be absent for a lie to work. It only needed to be less organized. At the bottom of the filing, Lydia requested a protective order. If approved, anyone presenting themselves as Nora Whitmore could be detained pending psychiatric and identity evaluation. Thomas finished reading and removed his glasses. "This is obscene." "It is effective." "You're admiring it?" "I'm understanding it." The filing had been prepared before the wooden bird appeared. Lydia had anticipated more than my return. She had anticipated my behavior. She expected me to contact old friends, visit the bank, approach the estate. She understood how an innocent person would behave. Then she built a system that made innocence look unstable. The realization made me reconsider everything. My email had not simply been hacked. My movements might have been monitored before I left. My letters intercepted. My assignment extension possibly encouraged. 6 months off the grid had not created Lydia's opportunity. It may have been part of her plan. I called the charity organization's regional office. After 3 transfers, I reached a coordinator named Helen. "Yes, Ms. Whitmore," she said, "I remember your placement." "Who requested the extension?" "You did." "No." The clinic director asked whether I would stay, but the formal extension was arranged before that conversation. Helen typed something. "The request was submitted through your personal email." "On what date?" "February 9th. That was 9 days after I arrived. The clinic's need for an extension had not been identified until March." "Was there an attachment?" "A signed authorization form." "Can you describe the signature?" "It appears digital." "Who approved it?" "Our deputy director." The form included a note saying you preferred not to be contacted by telephone because of local security concerns. My sister had extended my isolation. Not because she feared I would return too soon. Because she needed time to kill me properly. "Can you send me the form?" "To your registered email." "I no longer control it." "Then I'm afraid I need formal identification." Every road returned to the same locked door. "I understand," I said. Before hanging up, I asked one last question. "Did anyone contact you after my reported death?" "Yes." "Your sister requested records relating to your placement." "What records?" "Travel dates. Medical contacts. Next of kin." "Did you provide them?" "She had probate authority." "Of course she did." "Was anyone else copied?" Helen checked. A Daniel Vale. Daniel's role was larger than legal representation. He had helped build the timeline of my disappearance. He had collected travel records, arranged the death verification, managed the estate transfer, and appeared inside the house during Everly House meetings. The question was no longer whether he and Lydia were partners. The question was who had designed the plan. I searched corporate databases available through Thomas's Retired Teacher Association account. Public records revealed Everly House had been created as a holding company with 3 subsidiaries. One owned no property. One held marketing contracts. The third, Everly Heritage Development, had borrowed $28 million. The lender was an investment company registered in Delaware. Its directors were hidden behind another corporate structure. But the loan terms were public because a commercial lien had been filed. The first repayment was due Monday, 2 days after the memorial. If the payment failed, the lender could claim the commercial properties pledged from grandmother's estate. The final transfer was likely Lydia's attempt to move the remaining assets before the deadline. The inheritance was not funding a business. It was being used to absorb a debt designed to consume it. Thomas leaned over the documents. Could the company simply be failing? Possibly. You don't believe that? No. Why? Because the loan was issued before Everly House had employees, property, or revenue. To a company with no value? To a company expecting an inheritance. I traced the marketing contracts. Everly House had paid nearly $4 million to a consulting firm called Northstar Cultural Strategies. The address belonged to a rented office above a dental clinic. Its director was Adrian Cole, the man who had called Thomas Vale and Mercer's warning specialist. Daniel's employee was receiving millions from Lydia's company through a separate entity. It was not yet proof of fraud. Consultants were often overpaid. But the pattern was clear. Money entered Everly House from the estate. Everly House paid Northstar. Northstar disappeared behind private accounts. The company's public launch would attract new investors and justify the inflated valuation. My funeral was not merely emotional theater. It was investor theater. A grieving sister turning loss into legacy. An old estate becoming a luxury brand. A charitable mission built on the dead woman's reputation. They were selling my name before I could reclaim it. That evening, I made the second call to Lydia. I waited until 9:13. She answered immediately. "Who is this?" I said nothing. "You think this is clever?" I remained silent. Her breathing sharpened. "I know you're not her." I placed grandmother's old music box beside the phone. I wound the key and opened the lid. A thin melody played through the receiver. Lydia stopped breathing. Our mother used to play that melody when thunderstorms frightened us. After her death, Lydia refused to hear it. She once threw the music box against a wall and blamed me for repairing it. I let the tune continue for 10 seconds. Then I whispered, "You were supposed to keep the blue room locked." Lydia disconnected. The blue room had been our mother's sewing room. No one outside the family knew what we called it. More importantly, it had no connection to the estate transfer. The message was meant to create uncertainty. Was I inside the house? Had I seen something? Was there evidence in the blue room? A frightened person protects what matters. A guilty person reveals it by moving it. At 10:20, a service van arrived at the estate. At 10:31, 2 men carried archive boxes from the east wing. Thomas photographed them from the darkened upstairs window of a friend's house across the road. The boxes were loaded into the van. The vehicle belonged to a private records company. I called Edward. "Does Vale and Mercer use Halden document storage?" "No." "Does Everly House?" "I don't know." "Find out." At midnight, Edward called back. "Halden has a contract with North Star Cultural Strategies. Adrian's company." "What was stored in the East Wing?" I asked. "Your grandmother's personal archives. Letters. Property records. Old trusts." "The Blue Room?" "Yes." Lydia had moved the boxes. My meaningless sentence had identified something valuable. I wrote the storage company's address in my notebook. Thomas watched me. "You were right." "No." "About making her react." "I was fortunate." That distinction is becoming irritating. It is the distinction that keeps people from believing they are invincible. The next morning, Maribel called. Her voice was barely audible. "Miss Nora, I found something." "Where are you?" "At home." "Are you alone?" "Yes." "What did you find?" "When I went to the estate, one of the catering managers gave me a box of old kitchen items Lydia wanted discarded. And inside was Mrs. Whitmore's recipe ledger. Grandmother's recipes. Her name for financial records. Do not open it." I already did. I closed my eyes. "What is inside?" "Numbers. Bank names. Property addresses." "Anything else?" "A photograph." "Of whom?" "You and your sister. When you were children." My patience thinned. "Maribel, what is written on it?" She whispered the words. "For Nora." When Lydia believes the house is hers, look behind the north wall. The key waits with the winter roses. Grandmother had left the instruction for me. Not by accident. Not as a general precaution. She had named Lydia. When was the photograph taken? Your mother's last Christmas. I remembered the picture. Lydia was 8. I was 12. We stood beside the tree wearing matching red dresses, though Lydia had torn the collar from hers during an argument. Grandmother had preserved the photograph for more than 40 years and turned it into a warning. What else is in the ledger? A list of account numbers. One page has Mr. Caro name. Another has a company called Northstar. My grip tightened on the phone. Northstar existed before grandmother died. Is there a date? 3 years ago. Daniel's laundering channel had been on grandmother's radar. Perhaps that was why she created the inheritance restriction. Perhaps Lydia's business scheme had not begun after the funeral. Perhaps it was the reason grandmother had changed the will. Maribel, put the ledger somewhere safe. Where? Not your house. I can bring it to you. No. You may be followed. Then where? I thought of the one place Lydia would not search. Take it to St. Matthew's Church. Ask Father Julian to place it inside the locked parish archive. Tell him Eleanor Whitmore's granddaughter will collect it. Which granddaughter? He will know. Father Julian had been grandmother's priest for 30 years. He also disliked Lydia. Not openly. Priests rarely enjoy the luxury of open dislike. But he had once described her engagement party as energetically expensive, which was as close as he came to condemnation. Maribel delivered the ledger before noon. At 12:40, Father Julian called Thomas's house. Nora? Yes. I had hoped never to hear your voice under these circumstances. Did grandmother speak to you? She spoke to me about many things. About the north wall? A pause. She asked me to remember a sentence. What sentence? When the false mourner fills the house, the truth should enter through service. The memorial staff. Servers. Caterers. Florists. Grandmother had anticipated that Lydia would turn the house into a performance. And she had left me a route inside that performance. Did she explain what was behind the wall? No. Did she give you anything? She left a sealed letter. For me? For the person who could correctly answer a question. What question? Father Julian's voice became formal. What did your mother hide inside the music box? I closed my eyes. A memory returned. Our mother sitting on the floor during a storm. Lydia crying beneath the dining table. Mother lifting the velvet lining of the music box and placing something underneath. A train ticket, I said. To where? Brighton. Why? She planned to leave our father. Father Julian was silent. No one outside the family knew. Our mother died before she could use the ticket. Grandmother kept it hidden because she feared the truth would destroy what remained of the family. You may collect the letter, he said. Not yet. You are being careful. I am trying to be. Your grandmother believed caution and fear often wore the same coat. She usually said that when she wanted me to do something dangerous. She knew you well. The letter waited. The key waited. The north wall waited. But before I could enter the memorial, I needed to understand the transfer scheduled for Saturday. Edward found the answer late Friday afternoon. He arrived at Thomas's house pale and out of breath. They are selling the Whitmore commercial portfolio. To whom? The Delaware lender. The company holding Everly House's debt? Yes. At what price? Less than 60% of market value. The scheme became clear. Daniel's hidden lender had issued Everly House an impossible loan. Lydia pledged inherited assets to secure it. Everly House paid millions to Daniel's consulting network. Then the debt came due. The lender would acquire grandmother's properties at a discount. The estate would be emptied. The money would already be elsewhere. And Lydia? I asked. She appears to believe the company will receive a second funding round after Saturday's launch. She doesn't know the lender is connected to Daniel. We cannot prove that connection yet. Does she know the properties are being sold? She signed preliminary approval. Then she knows enough. Edward placed a document on the table. The final authorization requires a witness and ceremonial execution because several investors will be present. At the memorial. Yes. Why make it public? To create confidence. Investors see the estate transfer as Lydia committing her own assets to the business. But she is actually surrendering them to Daniel. Edward nodded. Lydia had murdered me on paper to inherit grandmother's estate. Daniel was now using her greed to take it from her. For the first time, I felt something other than anger toward my sister. I felt pity. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then I remembered the protective order. We go to the police now, Edward said. With what? The forged death certificate. The corporate transfers. The loan. You challenged the certificate already. Yes. And they overruled you. They accepted authenticated documents. Documents supported by Lydia's testimony and my compromised records. We have enough to stop the sale. Temporarily. That is the point. No. If the transaction freezes before Saturday, Daniel destroys whatever evidence connects him to the lender. Lydia blames an administrative delay. They both survive. Edward stared at me. You want them to complete the crime? I want them to explain it. In front of witnesses? In private. Thomas spoke from the window. And how do you expect to hear a private conversation? I looked at the catering company logo printed at the bottom of the memorial invitation. Through service. The catering company was called Beaumont Events. It supplied staff for hotels, political fundraisers, and private estates. Their manager had recently dismissed 3 temporary servers after a dispute over uniforms. Maribel knew the kitchen supervisor. The kitchen supervisor knew Father Julian. Father Julian knew how to ask for a charitable favor without explaining why it mattered. By Friday evening, a temporary employment form waited for me under the name Anna Mercer. No forged government documents. No false payroll account. The supervisor agreed to treat me as an unpaid volunteer helping during the memorial because Beaumont regularly used church volunteers for large community events. My gray hair would be hidden beneath a dark service cap. Glasses would alter the shape of my face. The staff uniform included a high collar and white gloves. Most importantly, Lydia would not look carefully at anyone carrying a tray. My sister had spent her life seeing service workers as moving furniture. Her arrogance would provide the disguise. The plan was not safe. It was not clever enough to be safe. But it was possible. And realistic plans rarely feel heroic. They feel uncomfortable. Incomplete. Dependent on ordinary people choosing not to betray you. That night, I collected grandmother's sealed letter from Father Julian. I opened it alone in the church's side chapel. The paper carried the faint scent of her writing desk. My hand shook before I unfolded it. My dearest Nora. If you are reading this, then Lydia has finally mistaken possession for ownership. I hope I was wrong about how far she might go. I fear I was not. I stopped. The chapel windows reflected rows of empty pews. I continued. 3 years ago, Lydia asked me to invest in a company introduced by Daniel Vale. The projections were false. The properties did not exist. When I refused, she borrowed against assets she did not own and used my name to reassure private lenders. I paid the first debt to protect the employees of one of our buildings. I should not have. Rescue can teach the wrong lesson. My throat tightened. Grandmother had covered Lydia's earlier fraud. Then changed the will to prevent another. I placed copies of the original proposals, account transfers, and Daniel Vale's correspondence behind the northern bookcase in the library. The small key opens the brass mechanism inside the third shelf. Edward knows nothing because I did not want him forced to lie. I turned the page. Nora, evidence can return property. It cannot restore trust. Do not let justice become an excuse to remain inside Lydia's darkness longer than necessary. Below that, grandmother had added one final line. And remember, Lydia lies most clearly when she believes she is comforting someone. I folded the letter. That sentence stayed with me. Lydia lies most clearly when she believes she is comforting someone. To make her confess, I did not need to threaten her. I needed to hear her reassure the person she trusted. Daniel. Or perhaps her husband. At 11 that night, the prepaid phone vibrated inside the biscuit tin. A message waited from Lydia. I know you're alive. Come to the house alone before noon tomorrow. We can fix this. Thomas read it. She wants to meet. No. She says she wants to fix it. She wants to know whether I have evidence. What if she genuinely regrets it? I looked at him. Then she can confess without knowing what I know. Another message arrived. Daniel forced me. I was trying to protect what grandmother left us. There it was. Not a confession. A test. She named Daniel to see whether I reacted. A third message followed. Please, Nora. I'm frightened. Grandmother's sentence returned. Lydia lies most clearly when she believes she is comforting someone. But this time, she was not comforting me. She was inviting me to comfort her. I typed a reply. The north wall remembers. I sent it. Then turned off the phone. Across town, inside the estate, Lydia would read those 4 words. She would look toward the library. She would realize I knew about the hidden compartment. And she would have less than 24 hours to decide whether to retrieve what grandmother had left there. I expected her to search the wall. I expected her to move the evidence. I expected fear. What I did not expect was the fire. At 2:16 on Saturday morning, sirens woke us. Thomas opened the curtains. Beyond the rooftops, an orange glow pulsed against the clouds. The northern side of the Whitmore estate was burning. The library. Grandmother's letters. The hidden files. Everything behind the wall. I stood barefoot beside the window while fire engines raced toward the house. Thomas whispered, "They destroyed it." I watched smoke climb into the night. No. What do you mean? They tried. I held up grandmother's small brass key. The key was still with me. If the compartment had been opened, they would have needed this. Unless Lydia found another way through the wall. Or unless the fire had not been started to destroy the evidence. Perhaps it had been started to force someone out. My temporary service pass lay on the table. The memorial had not been cancelled. At 6 in the morning, Beaumont Events sent a message to all staff. Event proceeding as scheduled. Library and North Corridor restricted. The room containing grandmother's evidence had burned. The gala would continue around it. And somewhere inside that damaged house, my sister was preparing to mourn me in front of 200 guests. I dressed in the uniform of a woman no one would notice. Then I placed the music box inside my bag. By sunset, Lydia would either sign away the last of our grandmother's estate or tell Daniel Vale exactly how she murdered me on paper. And this time I would be close enough to hear every word. By 8 o'clock Saturday morning, the fire had been reduced to a dark stain against the northern side of the house. The library windows were broken. Black water ran down the stone walls and gathered beneath the hydrangeas my grandmother had planted before either Lydia or I was born. From the road, the estate looked wounded. Inside, it was preparing for a party. Delivery vans crowded the circular drive. Florists carried fresh arrangements past firefighters rolling hoses across the lawn. A crew in black clothing unloaded speakers, projection screens, and polished metal stands. The smoke had not yet cleared, but someone had already replaced the scorched memorial poster at the gate. My smiling face welcomed the guests again. Lydia would not allow a fire to interfere with her performance. Especially not when millions of dollars were waiting in the audience. I arrived in the back of a catering van with 12 other temporary workers. No one spoke much. The younger servers stared at their phones. An older man beside me repeatedly checked the knot of his black tie in the reflection of the window. I wore a high-collared white shirt beneath a black jacket. A service cap covered most of my hair. Clear glasses with thick frames altered the line of my face. Makeup had not made me younger. It had made me less specific. A tired woman in her late 50s. Someone who might have worked in hundreds of homes and disappeared from each without being remembered. My identification badge read: Anna Mercer, Event Support. I had spent my entire life being Nora Whitmore. It took my sister 6 months to erase that name. It took the catering company 3 minutes to give me another. The van turned through the service gate. I kept my face angled toward the floor. Security officers checked the driver's paperwork and opened the rear doors. One of them swept a handheld scanner across our bags. When he reached mine, I felt the weight of grandmother's brass key inside the hem of my jacket. The music box had stayed with Thomas. It had already done what I needed it to do. My only equipment was a small voice recorder clipped beneath my collar. Edward had purchased it from an office supply store. Nothing sophisticated. Nothing hidden inside a wall or attached beneath furniture. It would record whatever I personally heard while working inside the house. The security officer searched my bag. Apron. Gloves. Notebook. A packet of tissues. He handed it back. Staff remain in assigned zones, he said. North corridor is restricted. The words confirmed what the smoke already had. The library mattered. The ballroom had been transformed overnight. White fabric covered the walls. Hundreds of candles stood inside glass cylinders, unlit for now. A platform had been constructed beneath the central chandelier. Behind it, a projection screen displayed a photograph of me standing beside grandmother in the East Garden. I remembered the day. Grandmother had been 83 and furious because Lydia had arrived 2 hours late for lunch. The photograph showed us smiling. It did not show the argument that happened afterward. Pictures rarely reveal the most important thing occurring in a room. That was why Lydia loved them. At the center of the stage stood a glass podium with the words, "The Nora Whitmore Legacy Initiative." My death had acquired a logo. The catering supervisor, Celia Beaumont, gathered us near the kitchen doors. She was a compact woman with silver hair and a voice sharp enough to cut through the noise of 40 people unloading glassware. "The client has requested absolute discretion," she said. "No photographs. No personal conversations with guests. Do not discuss the fire. Do not discuss the family." Her eyes moved across the staff. "When someone asks a question outside your responsibilities, find a supervisor. You are not being paid to become interesting. One of the younger servers smiled. Celia did not. Study doors remain closed unless you are delivering refreshments. Library access is prohibited. Anyone entering the north corridor without authorization will be removed. Her gaze paused briefly on me. Not because she recognized me. Because I was older than the other temporary workers and therefore more likely to have opinions. Anna, she said. Yes? You'll assist with tea service in the east drawing room until noon. After that, move to the ballroom. The east drawing room connected to the study. Exactly where I needed to be. Father Julian had not merely asked for a favor. He had chosen the assignment. Understood, I said. The kitchen smelled of coffee, butter, and smoke. Staff hurried between steel counters while a chef argued over trays of pastries that had absorbed the odor from the fire. Through the open service door, I saw Lydia for the first time at close range. She entered wearing a dark blue dress instead of black. Grief, but expensive grief. Her hair was pinned neatly at the back of her head. Grandmother's emerald ring flashed beneath the kitchen lights as she pointed toward a row of silver trays. These cannot go out, she said. The edges are uneven. Celia examined the trays. They are handmade. They look damaged. They are designed to look handmade. I don't want them. Celia's expression did not change. We will replace them. Lydia turned. For one terrifying second, her eyes settled directly on me. My body prepared to react before my mind could stop it. A slight tightening in my chest. A pull through my shoulders. The ancient instinct to become recognizable when seen by someone you love. I lowered my gaze. Coffee in the east room, Lydia said. She was speaking to me. Yes, ma'am. My voice sounded rougher than usual. I had practiced it with Thomas. Lydia did not pause. She walked past me carrying the fragrance she had worn since she was 25. Orange blossom and cedar. I had given her the first bottle. The east drawing room overlooked the gardens. Sunlight passed through rain-streaked windows and fell across pale furniture covered with memorial programs. 3 assistants were arranging name cards on a long table. Each card belonged to an investor, a city official, or someone whose presence could make Everly House look legitimate. Daniel Vale stood beside the fireplace speaking quietly into his telephone. He wore a charcoal suit and no tie. His calm seemed almost theatrical. A house had burned 6 hours earlier, but Daniel looked like a man waiting for a restaurant reservation. Yes, he said. The transfer remains on schedule. I placed the coffee service on a side table. Daniel turned his back to the room. No, she has not appeared. My hand stopped above the cups. He listened. She contacted Lydia. Nothing verifiable. Another pause. If she enters the property, security will detain her. I poured the coffee. The liquid struck the porcelain louder than I intended. Daniel glanced over his shoulder. I gave him the neutral expression of a worker worried she had made a mistake. He dismissed me with his eyes. Continue preparing the petition, he said into the phone. By Monday, the identity challenge will be irrelevant. He ended the call. An assistant approached him with a folder. Mrs. Whitmore is asking whether the revised announcement mentions the fire. No. She wants to describe it as a symbol of renewal. Daniel's mouth tightened. No references to the fire. Investors do not finance symbols. They finance assets. The assistant nodded and left. Daniel noticed me arranging the spoons. You. I looked up. Sir? Bring sparkling water to the study in 10 minutes. 2 glasses. Yes, sir. He walked away. The study door closed behind him. 2 glasses. Daniel and Lydia. My first opportunity had invited itself. Before entering the study, I passed the service stairs leading toward the north corridor. A plastic barrier stretched across the hallway. Beyond it, the carpet was soaked in gray with ash. The library door had been removed from its hinges. A security officer stood beside the opening. I could see only part of the room. Black shelves. A collapsed section of ceiling. Water dripping into metal buckets. The northern bookcase remained standing. Its outer frame was burned, but the wall behind it appeared intact. Grandmother had not hidden the evidence inside an ordinary cabinet. She had hidden it inside the house. A fire-resistant cavity, perhaps part of the original stone structure. The key in my jacket seemed suddenly heavier. Restricted area, the guard said. I'm going to the study. He pointed toward the other door. I nodded apologetically and continued. Lydia and Daniel were standing at opposite ends of the study when I entered. Their argument had already begun. You should have cancelled, Daniel said. And tell every investor the company is collapsing? Tell them the house is unsafe. The ballroom wasn't touched. The woman is in the city. She may not come here. She entered your pantry. Lydia looked toward me. I lowered my eyes and placed the water tray on the table. Daniel stopped speaking. Leave it, he said. I arranged the 2 glasses slowly enough to hear Lydia whisper. I told you, Maribel must have put the bird there. After receiving it from whom? I don't know. You said Nora never contacted the staff. She didn't. She contacted Thomas Bell. She contacted Caro. She may have contacted half the city. Lydia looked at me again. Are you finished? Yes, ma'am. I moved toward the door. Wait, Daniel said. My pulse climbed. He pointed to an empty coffee cup on the desk. Take that. I returned, lifted it, and walked out. The door closed behind me. I continued down the hall without changing pace. Only after reaching the service pantry did I touch the recorder beneath my collar. The voices had been captured. But not enough. Suspicion was not confession. At 10:15, Edward arrived wearing the tie he wore to every probate hearing. He entered through the main doors carrying a black umbrella. Lydia greeted him in the foyer beneath my photograph. From the service corridor, I watched her embrace him. Edward, she said. I'm so glad you came. I felt I should. Nora respected you. Edward's eyes met mine over Lydia's shoulder. The recognition lasted less than a heartbeat. She was often frustrated with me, he said. Lydia gave a sad smile. That was her way. It was such a small theft compared with the others. A description of my personality. An interpretation I could no longer correct. Edward handed his coat to an attendant. Has the fire affected the event? Only the library. How fortunate. Lydia's smile faltered. Yes. Very fortunate. Daniel appeared from the study. He and Edward shook hands. Neither man smiled. We need your signature before the announcement, Daniel said. I'm here as a guest. You are still the original estate solicitor. Which is precisely why I will not witness a transaction I advised against. Lydia touched Edward's arm. This isn't the time. No, he said. It is exactly the time. A photographer approached. Lydia's expression changed instantly. She moved closer to Edward, lowered her chin, and allowed the camera to capture the grieving sister being supported by an old family friend. The moment the photographer left, her hand dropped from his arm. "Steady," she said. The three of them went inside. I picked up a tray of tea. The study door opened before I reached it. Daniel stepped out. No interruptions. "I was told to bring tea." Later. He closed the door. I continued past him toward the drawing room. Inside the study, voices rose. Edwards carried first. "The sale price is indefensible." "The price reflects immediate liquidity," Daniel said. "It reflects a manufactured default." Lydia interrupted. "Please stop speaking as though I'm not here." "You signed the preliminary approval," Edwards said. "Did you understand it?" "Of course I understood it." "Then explain why a company controlled by your husband's associates is purchasing your grandmother's properties." Silence. "Husband." The word landed clearly. Daniel opened the door. Edward emerged first. His face was flushed. He passed me without looking in my direction. Behind him, Lydia said, "That was unnecessary." Daniel closed the door again. I followed Edward into the foyer and began collecting empty glasses. He stopped beside a table of memorial candles. Without moving his lips much, he said, "They married in February." "Where?" "Private ceremony in Delaware." "Why hide it?" "Conflict disclosure." Daniel's firm represented her in the inheritance transfer. "Does the court know?" "No." "Does the lender?" "He is the lender." My hand tightened around the tray. Edward continued. "The ownership chain ends with a trust controlled by Daniel." "Proof?" "Preliminary. An investigator is reviewing it now." "Which investigator?" "Special Agent Mara Jensen. Financial crimes." "You contacted her?" "After the fire." "Is she coming?" "She is already here." I scanned the foyer. Guests had begun arriving. An elegant woman in a gray suit stood near the registration table reading the memorial program. She looked like an attorney. She was watching the exits. Edward lifted one candle, examined it, and placed it back. "She needs direct evidence that Lydia knowingly participated in the identity fraud. The corporate case against Daniel is stronger." "And the death certificate?" "They traced the authentication payment to North Star, but the official who approved it has disappeared." "Convenient." "Very." He moved away as Lydia entered the foyer. I continued collecting glasses. At 11:30, the first group of guests was allowed into the ballroom. String musicians played near the windows. Waiters moved between conversations carrying champagne. The event did not feel like a funeral. It felt like the opening night of an expensive hotel built around the concept of mourning. Large screens displayed silent footage from my charity work. I recognized clips I had emailed Lydia before leaving. Children painting the clinic walls. Women carrying boxes of medicine. Me laughing beside a broken water pump. Lydia had taken the most unguarded moments of my life and placed a company logo beneath them. Everly House, Legacy Through Purpose. I stood beneath the screen holding a tray. Two women discussed me 3 feet away. "She was always so private," one said. "Sometimes private people are hiding sadness." I heard she had been troubled before the accident. Lydia never spoke about it. Very dignified. I wanted to turn and tell them that privacy was not sadness. That solitude was not illness. That traveling alone did not mean a woman wanted to disappear. Instead, I offered them champagne. One took a glass without looking at my face. "Thank you." "You're welcome," I said. At noon, Father Julian arrived. He paused beneath the memorial poster and stared at my photograph for a long time. Then he placed one hand against the frame. Lydia crossed the foyer to greet him. "Father." "My condolences," he said. It was the correct sentence. He did not specify for whom. "I hope you'll say a few words," Lydia told him. "I was asked to offer a prayer. And perhaps something personal about Nora. I will say what I believe is appropriate." Lydia's expression remained pleasant. "Of course." Father Julian entered the ballroom. As he passed me, he reached for a glass of water. "The north wall survived," I whispered. "So did you," he replied. Then he walked away. The opportunity to reach the library came at 12:23. A smoke alarm sounded in the service corridor. Not a real emergency. Steam from the kitchen had triggered a sensor near the damaged ventilation system. Security moved toward the kitchen while staff opened exterior doors. For perhaps 90 seconds, the north corridor had no guard. I placed my tray on a windowsill and stepped behind the plastic barrier. The wet carpet absorbed the sound of my shoes. The library smelled of soaked wood, ash, and old paper. Daylight entered through the broken windows. Fire had climbed one side of the room, consuming curtains and shelves, then moved across the ceiling. The northern bookcase was scorched but upright. Its central shelves had been pulled apart. Someone had searched it before or during the fire. I found the third shelf. Grandmother's letter had mentioned a brass mechanism. Black soot covered the wood. I ran my gloved fingers along the underside until I felt a small circular plate. The key fitted. I turned it. Something clicked inside the wall. The bookcase shifted forward less than an inch. I pulled. It opened on concealed hinges. Behind it stood a narrow steel door built into the stone. The outer surface was hot-stained but undamaged. The same key opened it. Inside was a fireproof compartment containing 3 document boxes and a sealed metal case. Grandmother had expected Lydia to search the house. She had perhaps even expected fire. I removed the first box. Financial correspondence. Copies of transfers. Letters signed by Daniel Vale. The second contained Lydia's original Everly House proposals and a document bearing my forged signature as guarantor. The date was 3 months before I left for San Aurelio. They had been planning to use my identity even before they decided to declare me dead. The third box contained a portable drive and a handwritten index in grandmother's careful script. I placed the drive and index inside the lining of my jacket. Photographing hundreds of pages was impossible. Removing every box would be noticed. I needed the compartment to appear untouched. I returned the documents and closed the steel door. Before shutting the bookcase, I examined the floor. A burned plastic container lay beneath the shelves. The remains of an accelerant bottle. The fire had begun exactly where grandmother hid the evidence. Someone knew about the north wall. But without the key, they had failed to open it. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. I closed the bookcase and pressed it into place. The mechanism locked. When I turned, Daniel stood in the library doorway. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. He looked at the bookcase. Then at me. "What are you doing?" I held up my empty hands. "I was told to check whether water was reaching the ballroom wall." "By whom?" "The kitchen supervisor." His eyes moved across my face. "Not recognition. Calculation." "Your name?" "Anna." "Anna what?" "Mercer." That caught his attention. Mercer was the second name in his law firm. I had chosen it because the catering form required a surname and because, At the time, the irony amused Father Julian. Now it seemed careless. Are you related to Charles Mercer? No, sir. Daniel stepped closer. Behind him, the corridor remained empty. The north wing is restricted. I'm sorry. The alarm went off and someone said. Who? I don't know his name. He studied my glasses. My mouth. The line of my jaw. I lowered my eyes and allowed my shoulders to curve. People see what posture tells them to see. Look at me, he said. I did. His expression changed. Only slightly. Not certainty. But recognition beginning to form. A radio crackled in the corridor. Mr. Vale, Mrs. Whitmore needs you in the ballroom. Daniel did not answer immediately. Then he stepped aside. Return to the kitchen. Yes, sir. As I passed him, he caught my wrist. His grip was controlled. Almost polite. Have we met? I forced confusion into my face. I served your table this morning. He released me. Go. I walked away. I did not hurry until I reached the service stairs. I found Edward near the coat room. Daniel saw me in the library. Did he recognize you? Not fully. What did you find? I slipped the portable drive into his hand beneath a folded napkin. Everything. He placed it inside his inner pocket. I'll take this to Jensen. No. Not yet. Nora. If Daniel realizes the compartment was opened, he may stop the transfer and leave. He may already realize. He saw no documents. He saw you. Then we have less time. Edward looked toward the ballroom. What do you need? The study conversation. We already have the corporate documents. I need Lydia admitting she knew I was alive or knew the death record was false. She may never say it directly. She will if Daniel threatens to abandon her. That is not something you can control. No. I looked toward the stage where Lydia's assistants tested the microphone. But I can increase the pressure. At 1 o'clock, I sent Lydia the final message. The prepaid phone was with Thomas, parked 2 streets away. We had arranged one sentence before I entered the estate. When I called his number from the pantry telephone and allowed it to ring once, he would send it. At 1:03, Lydia's phone vibrated on the table beside the podium. She read the message. From across the ballroom, I watched the color leave her face. Daniel kept copies. He never planned to save you. She looked toward Daniel. He was speaking with 2 investors near the windows. Lydia crossed the room quickly. She touched his elbow. He tried to continue the conversation. She whispered something. Daniel's expression tightened. They moved toward the study. I collected 2 glasses from a passing tray and followed at a distance. The study door closed. I waited 12 seconds. Then I knocked. Daniel opened it. What? Champagne. We didn't request. Lydia appeared behind him. Bring it. Daniel looked at her. I don't want staff in here. I do. Her voice carried an edge I had never heard before. Daniel stepped aside. I entered and placed the glasses on the sideboard. Lydia was holding her phone. Read it, she said. Daniel did. His face remained calm. Meaningless. She knows about the copies. She is guessing. How could she know? Because you panic every time she sends a sentence. I am not panicking. You burned the library. My hand stopped against the tray. Daniel's eyes moved toward me. Leave. I lifted the empty tray. Lydia said, no. Wait outside. We may need something. To Lydia, I was not a person. I was a movable object. She had just given me permission to remain within hearing distance. I stepped into the small service alcove beside the study. The door stayed slightly open. My recorder continued running. Inside, Daniel lowered his voice. You told me the wall was empty. I told you I never found the key. Your grandmother left instructions somewhere. And you said the fire would destroy whatever was behind it. The wall was reinforced. That's not my fault. Everything becomes your fault when you lie to me. Lydia laughed once. A brittle sound. You forged a death certificate. You signed the identification statement. Because you said Nora had extended her placement for a year. You extended it. You accessed her email. With the password you gave me. You planted the bracelet. Because you couldn't find anything else personal enough. My breathing slowed. Not because I was calm. Because my body understood that any sound could destroy the moment. Daniel spoke again. You reported her missing. You told the court she wanted to disappear. You signed every page. And you said there was no risk. There was no risk until she came back. You told me the accident record was clean. It was. Then how is she here? Because she was never on the bus, Lydia. Silence. A chair scraped across the floor. Lydia's voice became quieter. You told me there were unidentified bodies. There were. You told me one could be used. One was used. The room seemed to tilt. Somewhere, a real family had lost someone in that accident. Someone else's body had been absorbed into my sister's lie. Daniel continued. You knew what we were doing. I knew the certificate wasn't real. I did not know you had bribed an official to attach it to an actual victim. Do not pretend this distinction makes you innocent. I never said it did. For the first time, Lydia sounded tired rather than frightened. Daniel poured a drink. You wanted the estate. I wanted what grandmother should have left me. She left you 40%. She left Nora control. Because she did not trust you. She humiliated me. She understood you. The glass struck the desk. Lydia whispered, you said once the inheritance transferred, we would build Everly House together. We did. No. You moved the money through North Star. North Star provided services. You are North Star. Another silence. Who told you that? Daniel asked. The message. The message is designed to turn you against me. Is it true? Daniel did not answer. Lydia's voice broke slightly. Not grief. Recognition. You married me because the estate required a family narrative. I married you because it simplified control. You said you loved me. I said what allowed you to function. The cruelty in his voice was almost casual. Lydia did not respond for several seconds. Then she said something I had waited my entire life to hear. Not the confession. Something more personal. You always told me Nora was the obstacle. She was. So I removed her. The words were quiet. Controlled. I signed the death statement. I told them she was unstable. I used her passport. I took the bracelet. I let everyone believe she was in that grave because you promised me it would finally be my life. Daniel's answer came without warmth. And now you're going to sign the transfer because if you don't, you will lose everything anyway. You already took everything. No. I took what you were willing to exchange. For what? For the feeling that you had beaten your sister. The study fell silent. I should have felt victorious. I had the confession. Every word sat inside the small recorder beneath my collar. Instead, I felt as though I were listening to a room collapse. Lydia had spent her life competing with a version of me that existed only in her mind. Grandmother's trust became favoritism. My restraint became superiority. My inheritance became proof that she had lost. Daniel had not created that wound. He had simply found where to press. Lydia began crying. Not elegantly. Not the delicate grief she performed for cameras. She struggled to breathe. For one dangerous moment, I almost entered the room. She was still my sister. The child beneath the dining table. The girl who carved a wooden bird because neither of us knew how to speak after our mother died. Then Lydia said, "Help me fix it." Grandmother's warning returned. Lydia lies most clearly when she believes she is comforting someone. Daniel's voice softened. We can fix it. He moved closer to her. You will sign the transfer. You will deliver the speech. Then we leave tonight. Together? Of course. The tenderness was false. Even Lydia seemed to know it. But she accepted it because accepting the lie was easier than standing alone inside the truth. What about Nora? She asked. If she enters the estate, security detains her. And after that? She becomes a confused woman claiming to be someone legally dead. What if they believe her? Daniel paused. They won't hear from her long enough to matter. The sentence carried no explicit threat. It did not need one. I stepped away from the door. My hands were cold. At the end of the corridor, Special Agent Mara Jensen stood beside a flower arrangement. She had heard enough through Edward's live call. I had not known Edward had entered the ballroom service hall and placed his telephone near the receiver connected to my recorder. It was a simple arrangement. No hidden surveillance network. Just an open line, a lawful witness, and two guilty people who believed the woman serving their drinks did not exist. Jensen approached me. We have the corporate drive, she said quietly. Your identity has been provisionally confirmed through the biometric records from your former regulated industry clearance. Is that enough? Enough to stop the transfer. Enough to detain Vale. The recording supports probable cause, but we still need the original device. I unclipped the recorder and placed it in her hand. What about Lydia? She admitted participation. She also believes Daniel is taking her out of the country tonight. Jensen's face remained unreadable. We'll handle the exits. I need 5 minutes. For what? The video. No. The guests are investors. Several have already committed money based on my identity and my charity work. They can be interviewed privately. And Lydia will claim the recording was manipulated. The forensic team will authenticate it. Later. After the story has already become a dispute. Jensen studied me. You want public humiliation. I looked through the ballroom doors. My face filled the projection screen. No, I said. I want public correction. There is a difference? There has to be. The audiovisual technician was a young man named Owen. He had spent the morning complaining that Lydia's team had changed the memorial presentation 7 times. Edward approached him first. Jensen stood beside them. They did not ask Owen to hack anything. They showed him an official intervention notice authorizing the suspension of Everly House's investor presentation. The memorial tribute file would begin as scheduled. Then, at a predetermined point, Owen would replace the promotional segment with the authenticated audio and a simple black screen displaying the time and location of the recording. No edited montage. No music. No dramatic captions. Only the truth, sounding exactly as ugly as it was. Owen looked toward Lydia. She'll ruin my company. Jensen showed him her badge. She may have more immediate concerns. He swallowed. When do I switch it? Edward answered. After she says Nora's greatest gift was honesty. Owen almost smiled. Then he realized Edward was serious. At 2:30, the ballroom doors closed. Nearly 200 guests filled the room. The scent of flowers mixed with smoke that no amount of perfume could hide. Investors sat near the front. Neighbors and relatives occupied the middle rows. Cameras had been placed along the walls for the Everly House promotional recording. Lydia stood behind the glass podium. Daniel sat 2 chairs away. Edward was on the stage as an estate representative, though he had refused to sign anything. Father Julian sat beside him. Special Agent Jensen stood at the back with 3 plainclothes officers positioned near the exits. I remained among the service staff beside the eastern wall. Invisible. For the final time. The lights dimmed. Lydia placed both hands on the podium. Thank you for coming, she began. Her voice trembled with practiced restraint. My sister believed that a meaningful life was not measured by what we kept, but by what we gave away. The first lie arrived within 10 seconds. She continued. Nora was older than me, and as children, I followed her everywhere. She taught me how to ride a bicycle. She held my hand at our mother's funeral. She was the person I called when I was frightened. Those things were true. That made the rest more effective. A photograph appeared behind her. Lydia and me as children beside the Christmas tree. The same picture grandmother had used for her warning. Lydia glanced at it. For 1 second, her expression changed. She had probably seen the wooden bird in her mind. The music box. The north wall. Then she returned to the speech. When Nora left for San Aurelio, none of us knew it would be the last time we saw her. I watched Daniel. He was not looking at Lydia. He was checking the time. A leather folder rested on his lap. The final transfer documents. Lydia spoke about the accident. The unidentified passengers. The difficulty of accepting a death without a final goodbye. Several guests wiped their eyes. Thomas sat in the back row wearing his best suit. He did not cry. He watched Lydia with the stillness of a teacher waiting for a student to finish a dishonest answer. The tribute video began. Images from my childhood moved across the screen. Grandmother holding me as a baby. My first school photograph. Lydia and me sitting on the kitchen floor covered in flour. A birthday. A graduation. My mother's face. The room seemed to breathe with each transition. Then came San Aurelio. Children beside the clinic. The mountain road. The footage Lydia had used to build the story of my final journey. My own voice played through the speakers from an old recorded interview. I think dignity begins when people feel seen. The sentence echoed through the ballroom. No one looked at the servers. When the video ended, Lydia returned to the podium. She waited for the applause to fade. My sister's greatest gift, she said, was honesty. At the back of the room, Owen pressed a key. The screen went black. Lydia looked over her shoulder. A date and time appeared in white letters. Recorded today, East Study, Whitmore Estate. Daniel stood. Then his voice filled the ballroom. You forged a death certificate. Lydia's recorded answer followed. You signed the identification statement. The guests became silent. Not confused silence. The sharp, physical silence of a room realizing it has been used. The conversation continued. You extended it. You accessed her email. With the password you gave me. Lydia turned toward the control booth. Stop this. No one moved. Daniel walked toward the edge of the stage. Jensen stepped closer to the center aisle. On the screen, the words remained unchanged while the voices continued. I knew the certificate wasn't real. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Someone near the rear whispered, "My God." Lydia seized the microphone. This is fabricated. Her amplified voice overlapped with the recording. I signed the death statement. I told them she was unstable. I used her passport. I took the bracelet. Daniel moved toward the side exit. A plainclothes officer blocked him. Mr. Vale, remain in the room. This is a private event. Not anymore. The recording reached its final exchange. What about Nora? If she enters the estate, security detains her. And after that? She becomes a confused woman claiming to be someone legally dead. The speakers went silent. No music followed. No applause. Only the low hum of the ventilation system carrying smoke from the burned library. Lydia stood at the podium gripping its glass edges. Her face looked unfamiliar without control. This is not real, she said again. No one answered. She looked toward Edward. Tell them. Edward remained seated. Tell them Nora is dead. He removed his glasses. I can't. You certified the estate. I objected to the certificate. You processed the transfer. Vale and Mercer processed it. Lydia turned toward Daniel. Say something. Daniel did not look at her. He was watching the officers. That was the moment Lydia understood he would not save her. Not from the recording. Not from the debt. Not from himself. Her eyes moved across the ballroom. She was searching for a person willing to comfort her. Then she saw me. Perhaps she recognized the way I stood. Perhaps my glasses had slipped low enough for her to see my eyes. Or perhaps sisters know each other even after everything else has been stripped away. The color drained from her face. No, she whispered. I placed the empty tray on a table. Then I removed the service cap. The room seemed to tilt toward me. I took off the glasses. Thomas stood. Maribel, seated beside Father Julian near the aisle, began to cry. Lydia stepped back from the podium. No. I walked toward the stage. No one tried to stop me. People moved aside without being asked. For 45 days, every official record had said I was dead. For 6 months, my sister had been preparing the world to reject me. But a room full of people was watching me breathe. Sometimes the body is the first evidence. I climbed the stage steps. Lydia stared at my face. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Daniel finally looked at me directly. The brief uncertainty he had shown in the library disappeared. You, he said. Yes. Lydia shook her head. This isn't possible. I was beginning to feel the same way. Her eyes moved over my clothing. You were here. All morning. You were in the study. Yes. Her hand rose toward her mouth. I stopped several feet away. I had imagined this moment differently. In some versions, I was angry. In others, triumphant. Instead, I felt exhausted. Not physically. It was the exhaustion of seeing someone you once loved reach the end of a lie and discovering there was no satisfaction waiting there. Lydia looked older than she had that morning. Not because guilt had transformed her. Because performance had finally abandoned her. Special Agent Jensen stepped onto the stage. "My name is Mara Jensen. Federal Financial Crimes Unit." A murmur passed through the audience. She addressed Daniel first. "Daniel Vale, you are being detained in connection with suspected wire fraud, identity document fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful transfer of estate assets." Daniel's composure returned. "I want counsel." "You are counsel." "I want independent counsel." "You'll have the opportunity to contact one." Two officers approached him. He did not resist. Men like Daniel rarely imagine themselves being dragged from rooms. They expect procedure to protect their dignity even when they have destroyed everyone else's. As he passed Lydia, she reached for his arm. "Daniel." He did not stop. "Daniel, tell them I didn't know." He looked at her once. The expression was almost bored. "You signed everything." Then he was escorted from the stage. Jensen turned to Lydia. "Lydia Vale, also known as Lydia Whitmore, you are being detained pending investigation into the fraudulent death declaration of Nora Whitmore, identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy to misappropriate estate assets." The audience reacted to the surname. Vale. Their secret marriage had become public with everything else. Lydia stared at Jensen. "You can't arrest me at my sister's funeral." Jensen's eyes moved toward me. "This is not your sister's funeral." The sentence traveled through the room. Lydia looked at me. "Tell them." "What?" "That Daniel forced me." "You had 6 months to tell someone." "He threatened me." "You signed the first false document before you married him." Her face tightened. "You don't know what he said to me." "No. I know what you said about me. I was trying to protect the estate." "You sold it." "I was going to rebuild it. With my name." "I thought you weren't coming back." "You made sure no one expected me to." Lydia's voice rose. "You left." The word struck the oldest wound between us. "You always leave, Nora. When Mother died, you went to university. When Father got sick, you took that job in another city. When Grandmother chose you to manage everything, you acted as though it was a burden. I came back every time. After I had already done the difficult part." "You mean after you spent the money?" Several guests looked away. Lydia's face reddened. "You think you were better than me?" "No. You always did." "No, Lydia. You needed me to think that so you could hate me without feeling guilty." She recoiled as though I had touched her. The officers waited. Jensen allowed the conversation because Lydia was still speaking voluntarily. Every word mattered. Lydia's expression changed again. The anger softened. Her shoulders dropped. When she spoke, her voice became the voice she used as a child after breaking something valuable. "Nora, please." There it was. The invitation. "Comfort me. Make this less frightening. Take responsibility for the feeling I created." "I was scared," she said. "Daniel had debts. He said people would come after us. He said if you returned, you would take the house and leave me with nothing. I never planned to take the house from you. You had control. Because Grandmother did not trust your financial decisions. She poisoned you against me. She paid your first Everly debt." Lydia froze. I removed Grandmother's handwritten index from my jacket. She kept Daniel's letters. The forged guarantees. The North Star transfers. Everything. Lydia looked toward the burned library. You found them. Yes. The fire did not reach the compartment. Her eyes closed. The last hope left her face. The evidence had survived. The recording existed. Daniel had abandoned her. And I was alive. The 4 facts stood around her like walls. I can explain, she whispered. You already did. I did not mean for anyone to be hurt. A family buried an unidentified person under my name. I didn't know. You knew the certificate was false. I didn't know about the body. You knew enough. Tears ran down her face. For once, she made no effort to wipe them carefully. I'm your sister. Yes. The word seemed to give her hope. Then I continued. That is why this hurts. It is not why it disappears. Jensen nodded to the officers. They approached Lydia. She looked at me as they took her hands. Nora. I did not answer. Please don't let them take me through the ballroom. It was such a Lydia request. Even then, she feared the audience. The humiliation. The photograph people would remember. I looked at the guests. Neighbors. Friends. Investors. People who had mourned me sincerely and people who had attended because death made useful conversation. You made the ballroom part of the crime, I said. You don't get a private exit from the truth. The officers escorted her down the stage steps. No one spoke as she passed. The replacement memorial poster remained visible through the open doors. My smiling photograph watched my sister leave beneath the date she had chosen for my death. The final transfer folder remained on Daniel's chair. Jensen opened it with gloved hands. The signature pages were prepared. Lydia's name appeared above an empty line. The buyer was a company controlled through the Delaware trust tied to Daniel. The sale would have removed the last income-producing properties from grandmother's estate. It had not been signed. The transfer stopped 12 minutes before completion. Not because I had outsmarted everyone. Because grandmother kept records. Because Maribel remembered a strange sentence. Because Thomas gave me a room. Because Edward questioned a document that looked official. Because Father Julian protected a letter. Because an audiovisual technician chose not to look away. People like Daniel succeed by making each witness believe their small piece of truth does not matter. Justice began when those pieces entered the same room. The guests were asked to remain for interviews. The Everly House promotional cameras were seized. Investors were informed that all pledges and pending transfers were suspended. The ballroom filled with quiet, practical movement. Officers collected phones from key employees. Jensen's team sealed the study and the damaged library. Celia instructed the catering staff to clear the champagne. Even scandal created dishes that needed washing. I stood behind the stage while Edward approached. It's over, he said. No. He looked at me carefully. The event is over. That is not the same thing. No. He handed me a folder. Inside was a provisional identity order signed that morning. My fingerprints had matched records created during the regulatory clearance required for my former job. My physical identity was no longer in reasonable dispute. The court still needed to reverse the death registration. Banks would need formal notices. Accounts would remain frozen. Every contract executed after my supposed death would be reviewed. But the first sentence read, Nora Evelyn Whitmore is presumed living pending final administrative restoration. Presumed living. The language felt almost insulting. Then I remembered how much had been required to reach it. I touched the page. Can I leave? Edward nodded. Where will you go? I looked toward the burned north corridor. Home. The estate was released to my temporary control shortly after midnight. Not ownership. Control. The distinction mattered. Every account connected to the inheritance had been frozen. The commercial property sale was suspended. Everly House's board was prohibited from transferring assets. The house itself became part residence, part evidence scene. Yellow tape crossed the study door. The library remained open to investigators wearing white coveralls. The ballroom was empty. The flowers had begun to bend beneath the heat of the lights. My memorial photograph still stood behind the podium. I turned it face down. That was the only dramatic thing I allowed myself. Thomas wanted me to return to his guest room. "You have not slept properly in 4 days," he said. "I'll sleep here. In a house that was set on fire this morning. There are investigators in every hallway. That is not as comforting as you think." Maribel stood beside him holding my old blue scarf. She had found it in a box marked for disposal. "You should not be alone," she said. "I won't be." They looked toward the officers. "That is not what she means," Thomas said. I understood. But the house and I needed one quiet night together. Not because it was mine. Because it had been made to testify against me. I wanted to walk through the rooms without hiding my face. After they left, I went upstairs. My bedroom had been emptied. The bed was gone. My books had been boxed. Lydia had converted the room into a design office for Everly House. Fabric samples covered one wall. Architectural plans lay across a long table. A framed company slogan stood where my mother's photograph had once been. "Your past is your greatest luxury." I almost laughed. Then I saw a small cardboard box beneath the table. My name was written on it. Inside were the things Lydia had decided had no value. A chipped cup I made in school. Postcards from Thomas's daughter. A wool hat grandmother knitted badly. My mother's recipe cards. The wooden bird was not there. Lydia must have kept it after finding it in the pantry. I sat on the floor and held the wool hat. The house was silent except for distant footsteps and water dripping through the damaged ceiling. I had regained legal access. But I did not feel restored. A life is not a room that can be returned after someone changes the locks. At 2 a.m, Jensen found me in the bedroom. She had removed her jacket and rolled her sleeves to the elbows. "We located the corporate backups," she said. "On the drive? And in Vale's cloud account. Your grandmother's index gave us the naming structure." Was Daniel planning to leave? 2 tickets were booked for tonight. For him and Lydia? One for Daniel. One for his assistant. I looked up. Not Lydia. No. The message he sent her was never meant to lead to escape. He needed Lydia to sign the transfer and remain behind as the visible criminal. She had believed they were leaving together. Daniel had planned to let her take the weight of the fraud. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt the familiar frustration of watching Lydia choose someone else's promise over every warning. Did she know about the final buyer? We don't know yet. She knew the price was low. Yes. She knew the certificate was false. Yes. Then whatever she didn't know will become the only thing she talks about. Jensen leaned against the table. People often confess to the smaller crime when the larger one frightens them. What happens now? Vale will be questioned with counsel present. Your sister will be processed locally, then possibly transferred depending on the charging decision. Will the estate come back? Some assets never left. Some transfers may be reversed. Some money is gone. How much? Too early to say. That was the first honest answer anyone had given me about the money. Jensen looked around the converted bedroom. You handled yourself well today. I served drinks while my sister confessed to killing me. On paper, it did not feel less personal. No. She hesitated. Why didn't you go to law enforcement on the first day? Would you have believed me? Eventually. That was the problem. She accepted the answer. Then she said, the public reveal was risky. I know. You could have compromised the investigation. I know. You also prevented several investors from wiring funds during the announcement. I looked at her. Is that your version of approval? It is my version of not arguing at 2 a.m. She walked toward the door. Before leaving, she added, for what it's worth, your identity was not restored because people saw you on a stage. It was restored because records matched. I know. But the room needed to see you. Yes. So did your sister. The next morning, news vans lined the street. The story had escaped the estate before sunrise. Dead heiress returns at Memorial Gala. Identity fraud exposed during luxury company launch. Lawyer and wife detained in multi-million-dollar estate scheme. Every headline made the truth sound cleaner than it was. Reporters called my return a resurrection. It was not. A resurrection suggests one clear moment when life begins again. Mine required forms. Interviews. Fingerprints. Medical examinations. Statements from people who knew me. A court hearing to reverse the declaration of death. A second hearing to restore my authority over accounts. A third to determine whether transactions made under Lydia's control could be invalidated. For weeks, I was alive in person and dead in databases. My health insurance rejected a routine appointment because the policyholder was deceased. A government office mailed my identity restoration notice to the estate addressed to the representatives of the late Nora Whitmore. The absurdity was almost elegant. The bank returned my passport through Special Agent Jensen. Martin Feldman brought it personally. We met in grandmother's breakfast room. He placed the document on the table. I owe you an apology. You followed procedure. I followed it without considering what it felt like to be on the other side. That is what procedure is designed to prevent. He looked down. I should have done more. You gave me a name without giving me a name. His eyes lifted. You noticed that? I notice most things. I remember. He slid another folder toward me. My personal accounts remained frozen, but the bank had opened an emergency living expense facility under court supervision. The amount was modest. After millions had passed through my identity, I needed judicial permission to buy groceries. Thank you, I said. Martin stood. At the door, he turned. Lydia visited the branch 2 days after your reported death. What did she do? She cried. I waited. She asked whether you had left any message for her. Had I? No. But she already knew she controlled the account. Yes. The performance had begun immediately. Even when no audience was necessary. Perhaps Lydia no longer knew the difference between grief and rehearsal. 3 weeks after the gala, I attended the hearing that formally restored my legal status. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No cameras. No crowd. Only attorneys, clerks, and a judge who appeared mildly irritated by the volume of paperwork required to confirm that a breathing woman had not died in another country. The judge reviewed the biometric match, travel records, witness statements, and evidence of the falsified certificate. Then she looked at me over her glasses. Ms. Whitmore, for the record, state your full name. Nora Evelyn Whitmore. Date of birth? I answered. Current address? I looked toward Edward. The Whitmore estate. The judge signed the order. That was all. No music. No applause. A clerk stamped 3 copies. The legal system returned my life with the sound of paper striking paper. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited behind barriers. Edward asked whether I wanted to make a statement. No. You may not get another opportunity to control the narrative. I have spent 6 months inside someone else's narrative. I don't want to live inside mine either. We walked through a side exit. Lydia requested to see me 5 times. I refused the first 4. Her attorney sent letters describing her as manipulated, isolated, emotionally dependent, and unaware of the full financial structure. None of the letters mentioned the bracelet, or the email account, or the statement that I wanted to disappear. Daniel may have designed the machinery. Lydia had supplied the details only a sister could know. On the 5th request, she wrote to me directly. The letter contained 1 sentence. I need to know whether grandmother ever loved me. I agreed to visit. Not because she deserved an answer. Because I needed to understand why that question remained after everything else. The detention center sat beside a highway outside the city. The visitation room smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. A plastic divider separated us. Lydia entered wearing a plain gray uniform. Without makeup, she looked more like our mother. That unsettled me. She sat and picked up the telephone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. You cut your hair, she said. It was damaged by the village water. I always liked it longer. I remember. She looked toward the guard. Is the house all right? The library needs rebuilding. I didn't start the fire. Daniel did. I told him not to. But you knew. After. I waited. She lowered her eyes. I knew before the fire department arrived. You could have called them sooner. He said the wall was stone. You gambled with the entire house to destroy evidence. I was afraid. That explanation has done a great deal of work for you. Her mouth tightened. You came here to punish me. No. If I wanted punishment, I could have stayed home. Then why did you come? You asked about grandmother. Lydia's expression changed. For a moment, she looked young. Did she love me? Yes. Then why did she leave you control? Because love and trust are not the same thing. Lydia looked away. She always expected me to fail. She paid your first debt. I didn't ask her to. You did. Through Daniel. I asked for an investment. You gave her false projections. I was trying to build something. You were trying to become someone no one could question. She pressed the telephone closer to her ear. You don't understand what it was like. What? Being compared with you. Who compared us? Everyone. Name one person. Grandmother. She criticized your decisions. She praised your judgment. Those are not the same act. To you. Her voice sharpened. You walked into rooms and people trusted you. You never had to ask. You were sensible Nora. Reliable Nora. Nora who didn't need anything. I needed plenty. You never showed it. I was 12 when Mother died. I learned not to. Lydia became quiet. That truth belonged to both of us. But we had carried it differently. I became controlled. She became demanding. Neither response had been healthy. Only one had become criminal. I thought you were dead for 3 days, Lydia whispered. The statement surprised me. What? After Daniel showed me the accident report. Before he said the certificate could be arranged. You believed I might actually have been on the bus? Yes. And what did you feel? She looked at me. Relief. The honesty hurt more than another lie would have. Then guilt, she continued. Then fear. Then he said perhaps this was the answer. The answer to what? Everything. There is no single answer to everything. I know that now. No. You know the answer you chose failed. Her face tightened. You always know exactly where to cut. I learned from you. She began to cry. This time I did not move toward her. The divider made that decision easier. Did you ever miss me? I asked. Every day. While wearing my ring? She looked at her hand, though the ring was gone. I told myself grandmother wanted it kept in the family. It was already in the family. I know. While using my name for Everly House? I told myself I was carrying your work forward. You were selling it. I know. While telling the court I was unstable? Her eyes closed. I told myself it was temporary. That sentence is how permanent damage is usually made. A guard announced that 5 minutes remained. Lydia wiped her face with the back of her hand. What will happen to me? I don't know. You know more than I do. Your attorney knows. Will you speak for me? There it was again. Comfort me. Rescue me. Become responsible for the consequences I created. I will tell the truth if asked. The truth will destroy me. No. The truth describes what you did. What happens next belongs to the court. I am your sister. Yes. You keep saying that as though it means nothing. It means this conversation hurts more than it would with a stranger. Is that all? No. I looked at her through the divider. It means some part of me will always remember the girl who gave me a wooden bird when I couldn't sleep. Her face collapsed. You found it? It was in your room after the arrest. I kept it. Why? She pressed her fingers against the glass. Because I knew it was you. When? The moment I saw it in the pantry. You still continued. I didn't know how to stop. You could have opened the gate. I thought you would take everything. You had already taken it. The guard signaled. Time. Lydia lifted the telephone with both hands. Nora, I'm sorry. The words were small. No speech followed. No explanation. For once, she did not decorate them. I believed she felt sorry. I did not know whether she was sorry for me, for herself, or for the fact that the plan had ended. Perhaps remorse begins before a person understands its direction. I placed the telephone back in its cradle. Then I left. The legal cases lasted 14 months. Daniel Vale was charged with multiple counts connected to wire fraud, identity document fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and the attempted transfer of estate assets. His firm collapsed within weeks. 3 partners claimed they knew nothing. 2 employees became cooperating witnesses. Adrian Cole was arrested while trying to cross the border with encrypted drives and $80,000 in cash. The foreign official linked to the death certificate was located months later. The body used to support my false death was identified as a woman named Elena Marquez. She had been 47. A school cook. A mother of 2 adult sons. Her family had been told her remains were among those too damaged to identify. They had buried an empty coffin. I attended the private service when Elena was finally returned to them. I did not introduce myself publicly. There was no place for my story inside their grief. Afterward, one of her sons approached me. "You're the woman whose name they used." "Yes." He looked at me for a long time. "My mother had a name." "I know. Make sure people remember it." "I will." Everly House's promotional foundation was later dissolved. The remaining charitable funds were transferred, by court order and with the family's permission, to the clinic where Elena had once received treatment. It did not repair what had happened. Money is often asked to perform moral work it cannot do. But it could carry her name somewhere useful. Lydia eventually entered a guilty plea to charges involving identity theft, false statements, probate fraud, and conspiracy. Her attorneys argued that Daniel manipulated her. The court agreed that he had. It also found that manipulation did not erase the months of deliberate choices she made without him standing beside her. The sentence was less severe than some people wanted and more severe than Lydia believed she deserved. I did not attend the final hearing. Justice did not require me to watch every door close. Because she had personally guaranteed several Everly House obligations, Lydia remained responsible for substantial business debts unrelated to the frozen estate assets. The fraudulent property sale was cancelled. Several earlier transfers were reversed. Others were not. Nearly one-third of grandmother's liquid portfolio disappeared through companies that had already been emptied. The estate survived. Not untouched. Survival and restoration are different things. I had learned that personally. The Whitmore house remained closed for repairs through the winter. The ballroom decorations were removed. The Everly House logos came down. The glass podium was placed in storage until I ordered it thrown away. Maribel returned, not as a housekeeper, but as a state manager. She negotiated a salary higher than the one grandmother had paid her. "I am too old to be grateful for employment," she told me. "You're not being hired as an act of charity." Good. Charity is usually underpaid. Thomas visited every Tuesday and complained about the quality of my coffee. Edward retired 6 months after the trial. He claimed the case had nothing to do with his decision. No one believed him. He still wore the same tie whenever he came for lunch. Father Julian returned grandmother's letter to me after the evidence hearings ended. I placed it inside the steel compartment behind the north wall. Not because I expected another betrayal. Because some truths need a place where fire cannot reach them. The library was the last room to be repaired. Architects wanted to replace every burned shelf and polish the stone until no damage remained. I refused. One section of the north wall still carried a dark mark from the fire. We sealed it beneath clear protective glass. People asked why I kept it. I told them the house should not pretend nothing happened. Neither should I. The room reopened as the Eleanor and Elena Archive for Financial Exploitation. It provided free document storage, legal clinics, and identity recovery assistance for older adults targeted by relatives, caregivers, and financial advisors. I did not name it after myself. My name had received enough attention. For several months, strangers sent me letters. Some described relatives who had stolen pensions. Some wrote about signatures forged during illness. Others told me they had been declared incompetent by children who wanted control of property. They asked how I remained calm. The answer was that I did not. Calm is often what fear looks like when movement is still required. I cried in bathrooms. I forgot entire conversations. I woke at 3 in the morning convinced my passport would disappear from the drawer. I checked the locks repeatedly. For weeks, I could not hear the music box melody without feeling Lydia's voice inside the study. Emotional control did not mean the betrayal failed to damage me. It meant I chose where the damage was allowed to lead. 6 months after the trial, a small package arrived from Lydia. The prison had inspected it. Inside was the wooden bird. The chipped wing had been repaired with a thin line of gold-colored resin. A note was folded beneath it. I used to think fixing something meant hiding where it broke. I know better now. There was no request for forgiveness. No question. No explanation. I placed the bird on the shelf beside grandmother's letter. I did not write back immediately. Forgiveness is often described as a door. In reality, it is sometimes only the decision to stop standing in a burning room. It does not restore access. It does not cancel consequences. It does not require reunion. Months later, I sent Lydia a photograph of the repaired library. Nothing else. She replied with 2 words. I remember. That was the beginning of the only relationship we could still have. Not reconciliation. Recognition. On the first anniversary of my legal death, I returned to the iron gate where I had seen the memorial poster. The black ribbon was gone. The security code had been changed again, this time by me. Lavender moved beside the path in the morning wind. For a while, I stood outside without entering. I thought about the woman who had arrived there carrying a dusty travel bag. She believed the worst thing waiting for her was stolen money. She did not yet understand that a stolen name changes the way every room receives you. It makes friends hesitate. It makes institutions doubt your face. It turns memories into evidence and personality into accusation. Lydia did not merely claim my inheritance. She rewrote the meaning of my absence. She told people my independence was instability. My silence was secrecy. My compassion was escape. To reclaim my life, I had to do more than prove I was breathing. I had to separate myself from the woman she invented. For most of our childhood, I believed family was the group of people who knew your earliest name. The people who remembered you before the world decided what you were worth. I understand it differently now. Family is not proven by shared blood, photographs, or inherited rooms. It is revealed by what someone does when they are given access to your vulnerability. Thomas protected me when protecting me was inconvenient. Maribel remembered a sentence for years without knowing whether it mattered. Edward questioned documents that everyone else accepted. Father Julian kept a letter without trying to control how it was used. Grandmother built safeguards because love did not make her blind. And Lydia. Lydia knew every version of my name. She knew where I kept my passport. She knew which bracelet would make a death believable. She knew how people interpreted my quietness. Knowing someone deeply is not the same as loving them safely. Sometimes it only gives betrayal better tools. I entered the new code. The gate opened. For the first time since my return, the movement did not feel like a victory. It felt ordinary. And ordinary was what I had wanted all along. Not revenge. Not applause. The ability to enter my own home without explaining why I belonged there. I walked up the path as sunlight reached the repaired library windows. Behind the north wall, grandmother's records were safe. On the shelf, the wooden bird waited with its golden scar. My name was back on the deed. Back on my passport. Back in every official system that had once rejected it. But the most important place I reclaimed it was inside myself. I was not the unstable woman Lydia described. I was not the tragic symbol Everly House tried to sell. I was not the ghost at the gate. I was Nora Evelyn Whitmore. Alive. Imperfect. Still learning what to keep and what to leave behind. And now I want to ask you something. If you returned home and discovered that someone you trusted was living under your name, spending your future, and convincing the world that you no longer existed, would you confront them immediately? Would you quietly collect the truth? Or would you make sure the entire world witnessed the moment your life became yours again? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who understands that the deepest betrayals do not always come from strangers. Sometimes they come from the people who know exactly where your identity is kept.